Extempers, debaters, and speechers, and everybody else. Welcome to another episode of The Half Hour. Now, it is the 17th episode, and it is also the new year. So first of all, Happy New Year, everybody. And second of all, this episode's going to be a little different. We're actually just going to do a recap of the whole year and give you kind of bits and pieces of news, of new news / old news, and kind of talk about that a little bit just so y'all are caught up for the year and ready for the new year.
Absolutely. And as always, I'm Spencer.
I'm Yu. You should know our names, but if you're new, welcome.
Yeah, we're going to do a cool recap of 2021 in hopes that we can learn hopefully some of the mistakes that have happened in 21 and apply them and make our lives better in 2022. But if that doesn't happen, I hope the new year's going well. Do you have any New Year's resolutions kind of thing? Is that something that you believe in?
Survive. Nothing else. Nothing more.
I don't mean to be like the party pooper of everybody, but I'm starting to not believe in New Year's resolutions because it looks like nobody achieves them. A month in, they go, well, whatever. It's just one of those things that frustrates everybody. So why pose a New Year's resolution if you're not even going to apply it, right?
I hope I survive a month into the year. Anyway, so it's going to be a little different. Like I said before, what we're going to do is we're going to separate this into domestic topics and international topics. So Spencer will do 3 domestic topics. I will do 3 domestic topics, and then he'll do 3 international topics, and I'll do 3 international topics. And we'll just go into kind of the top 3, or in our opinion, the top 3 of what has went down recently. Brief disclaimer, the bits and pieces of news that I've chosen have happened pretty recently or have happened in the second half of the year, because the first half of the year for me has gone by. And there aren't probably any Extemp questions on them anymore. So we'll see.
And then at the end of this video, we'll go through a couple of questions that I've worded them a little different than what the NSDA does. For those who don't know, Extemp Central stops over the holiday. So there's no questions that are posted. So I just took a couple of worded questions from that I would think the NSDA writes about how you can learn from 2021. And we've broken them up into a domestic and an international question. They're open-ended typically. So we'll go through a couple of possible questions with reflections on 2021. Hope you guys have been enjoying the prep room. I hope that the new episode has released this week. I did get it edited. I'm very sorry. We're doing a horrible job at getting them out weekly. That's mainly my fault. I'm the one that edits them. So you can blame me. You can send your hatred to my DMs, and then I will block you. That sounds like a great idea.
Just rude. Can't take constructive criticism.
Just kidding. We take constructive criticism. Anyway, let's jump right into this. Obviously, this is just going to be brief and it's going to be quick. So, U.S. issues that happened this year. Number 1, we had the insurrection at the Capitol, which occurred on January 6th as a result of Congress approving states' votes to the 2020 election. Supporters of former President Trump basically broke into Capitol Hill, avoiding Capitol police officers, and tried to force an overturning of the 2020 election. Some people argue that this was pushed further by tweets that Trump made over Twitter. There's also the discussion that this was a result of Facebook and Instagram not being able to accurately control their algorithms. We had a whole discussion about that in a podcast relating to Facebook and Frances Haugen this year. Because of the insurrection at the Capitol, the House of Representatives established a January 6th committee, which has a purpose of establishing the timeline of events that had occurred on the day of the insurrection. So basically, it's its form of justice to try to hold some people accountable, but also to impose the truth of exactly what had occurred on that day. As a result of this, former President Trump was impeached by the House of Representatives for the second time, making him the first president to be impeached twice. Topic number 2, President Biden's inauguration. We'll keep this short. In late January, President Biden was inaugurated as the 46th president of the United States with Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris is the first vice president of color and the first vice president woman. In Biden's inaugural address, he was focusing specifically on prevailing the aspects of democracy. Some of his quotes included, quote, "We have learned again that democracy is precious, democracy is fragile, and at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed." Another very important quote that he brings, quote, "This is a great nation and we are good people. Over the centuries, through storm and strife and peace and war, we have come so far, but we still have far to go. We will press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and possibility, much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain." The final big topic that I will present for US is Derek Chauvin's trial. In April, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was found guilty in the murder of George Floyd. The jury's decision took only a day and a half. New evidence was found by the prosecution showing that the murder of George Floyd was by a strain on his neck that was for 9 minutes and 49 seconds. The conviction of Derek Chauvin showed accountability must be held for police officers. It was also a major win for supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement.
That leads right into my top 3 for U.S. news. First is the U.S. debt ceiling, which we covered in an earlier episode. This is the event that almost caused another government shutdown to happen and was a big U.S. economic problem. Thankfully, Congress, specifically the House, was able to raise the debt ceiling by $2.5 trillion, avoiding a debt default until the midterms. What basically happened is that it passed on Tuesday, December 14th in the Senate, 50-49, and then went to the House on Wednesday, December 15th, and passed 221-209, with Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger being the only Republican to vote for the bill in the House. It was popular among party lines for Democrats. But the fight isn't over yet. They have simply just avoided a default until 2023, which is after the midterms, where we'll see who controls the House and also who gets to stay in the Senate. At least a third of Senate members are going to be up for elections in the midterms. Second topic is the Facebook controversy that we have seen unfold throughout this year. Frances Haugen has released information about Facebook's failure to stop false information and even promoting things like QAnon conspiracies and rhetoric that promotes violence because of the nature of their algorithm. And then there was also the shutdown that happened on Monday, October 5th, which drove everyone crazy and also made Facebook lose $6 million. The third topic I'm going to be covering is abortion laws. This year was crazy for abortion laws and not in a very good way. We discussed again in an earlier episode about the Texas abortion law, or the Heartbeat Act, which is practically a near total ban on abortions in the state. The Supreme Court has allowed it to remain intact, but not only in Texas, but also in Ohio. They have passed a bill relating to abortions called the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, making doctors report if the baby is still alive after an abortion or an attempted abortion, and also making doctors do all they can to make sure that baby stays alive, basically. And furthermore, physicians can no longer interact with other physicians or doctors who work at state hospitals or are part of state universities if they are associated with doing abortions or a part of the abortion clinic. Also in Mississippi, they are looking to ban abortions, or at least have the Supreme Court get rid of the legal protections to abortions. And they have also implemented somewhat of a ban, but not really. It's just prohibiting you from getting an abortion at 15 weeks.
And that jumps us nicely into the international events. The first topic of concern is the variants of COVID-19. In 2021, 2 prominent variants of COVID-19 had appeared in new waves across the world. This was the Delta variant and the Omicron variant. The Delta variant was first discovered in India at the end of 2020. The Omicron variant was first discovered in South Africa in November 2021. The current threat of COVID-19 happens to be the Omicron variant. In comparison to Delta, it only produces mild symptoms. However, it spreads much quicker. It is important to note that around the end of 2021, it is clear that 800,000 Americans and 5 million people worldwide have died from the coronavirus pandemic. Topic number 2, the Taliban retakes Afghanistan. In 2020, a deal was struck between former President Trump and the Taliban that the U.S. would withdraw troops from Afghanistan. It was pushed back to September 11th of 2021 to commemorate 20th anniversary by President Biden 2 weeks before the deadline. As troops began to withdraw from Afghanistan, the Taliban regained power quickly, and by August 15th, Kabul fell into the Taliban's hands. Then the Taliban ordered that all American troops withdraw from Afghanistan by the end of August. As a result of America withdrawing from Afghanistan, President Biden saw a major decrease in his approval ratings. And even though the Taliban said that there would be differences from its previous government, the Taliban has looked nothing like that. Topic 3, one that we didn't cover, an advancement of Iran's nuclear program. There was hope that at the beginning of this year that Iran would be back into a nuclear deal. President Biden joined the European Union in diplomatic negotiations to get back to an agreement with Iran. Unfortunately, in April, a nuclear facility in Iran exploded, which prompted Iran to mention that they were enriching uranium at 60%. In June, Iran elected a brand new president, Ebrahim Raisi, and Raisi mentioned that the will of the people had changed and that negotiations would go back to a nuclear deal. However, in November, Iran was negotiating with the U.S., but ultimately fell short. Now Iran stands in a spot where they could mine uranium that could build them to a nuclear power, and they are definitely getting closer to that.
And for my topics, we're going to start off with the coup in Sudan, something we have also covered. So I'm just going to give you a few updates here. If you haven't listened to that episode, listen to that episode. So there's still protests and violence taking place in Sudan. Only a couple of days ago, the New York Times reported on an anti-coup protest demanding to get back to civilian rule in Khartoum. The protests took place in Khartoum, the country's capital. Sudanese forces are pushing back using tactics like tear gas and violence to control the crowds of thousands and to basically suppress them. With that being said, the coup isn't exactly over, as they haven't transitioned into another form of government and haven't reached a place of stability yet. So that's something to still keep looking at and keeping updates on in the upcoming year. For topic 2, we're going to talk about conflicts by the truckload. What I mean by that is basically 2 state conflicts that have been happening throughout the year of 2021 and also before. So mainly China and Hong Kong. China wanting to take control of Hong Kong not really agreeing. That conflict is still going on. It is also somewhat dragging in the United States and definitely making tensions increase between the two parties. We're seeing a lot of tensions, mainly in the United States, seeing China as a revisionist country, meaning China's focused on expansion, which is indicated by wanting to take full ownership or state control of Hong Kong. Other than that, we see Ethiopia and Tigray with their civil war that is still brewing, still going on. Nothing's resolved exactly yet. So that's also something to keep track of. Israel and Palestine started all the way in 2019 when conflicts arise over the Gaza Strip and this piece of land. They haven't resolved their issues yet over that piece of land. There's still tensions between them. Violence has occurred between them also. The Gaza Strip is a very precious piece of land to both Israel and Palestine, and they have yet to reach a conclusion. So then we have Russia and Ukraine. Again, similar to China and Hong Kong, but mainly Russia pushing to gain more control of Ukraine and Ukraine saying, no, hands off. So that's what I mean by conflicts galore. A lot more is going to happen between these 2 state conflicts, and what we'll see from that will happen in 2022. So the third topic we're going to talk about is climate change. COP26 happened about a month ago. It was a crucial part for countries to be able to come together and make important progress towards stopping climate change. The main thing that came out of it was the Glasgow Climate Pact, which asked countries to phase down on fossil fuels and coal, but not completely get rid of the use of them. 130 countries have pledged to stop deforestation. Over 100 countries have agreed to slash methane emissions by 30% by 2030. And at the conference, there was a lot of talk about how to help countries in the periphery who don't have the resources or funding to decrease their emissions and how they could help in the fight against global warming. However, despite these agreements, higher officials in the United Nations have mainly agreed that this is not enough to keep the world under 2 degrees Celsius and also make progress in the fight against climate change. So we'll see in the coming future if these promises that have been made in COP26 are being met, and if countries and world leaders are willing to kind of cooperate with each other. A big thing, though, Biden and China have agreed to cooperate on decreasing their emissions, just as like world powers. So we'll see how that works out in the future.
There is your basic, really fast recap of 2021. And we kind of designed it this way so we can talk a little bit more about what we can expect going forward. I think it is kind of an interesting discussion, like, before we even get to possible questions, like, what are going to be some topics of concern in 2022? And I think that you and I are perfectly fine throwing out some ideas here, things that we know are going to be big topic issues. Obviously, the pandemic is going to be one of them. The question is, will we see more variants? Are we going to see the end of the pandemic in 2022? How are we going to react to how are countries going to react? Is vaccinating everybody the answer to the question? Or is this thing still got a whole nother couple years in it? What else do we have with the pandemic that's going to go on?
Exactly. On top of that, all the conflicts between countries is another thing and an international topic that you should be looking at. Mainly civil war between Ethiopia, Tigray. I would say China and Hong Kong, things haven't seemed really like aggressive lately in the news, but then again, I would still like keep track of it, look up those articles within news sources, but especially take a look at the kind of tensions between the United States and China and what we're going to do with that. But also all these other conflicts that the news doesn't really cover yet is still a big and important thing that you should look at.
Well, I certainly think that we're talking multiple conflicts. I think, especially in 2022, the Ukrainian border is going to be a really big discussion. We may end up having to cover that very soon if things continue to escalate. It's a very big conflict that's been happening. We want people to be very well aware of it. I don't think it's at the time, at least of this recording, that it's time to see how to discuss this issue. But it is definitely one that is becoming into consideration. I'm kind of interested in seeing a little bit more on Biden's foreign policy this coming year. I think that there's a lot of questions that are raised about how he's going to go about policy plans. We mainly note the Afghanistan issue that's happened this year, but I certainly think that there's more than just Afghanistan. I mean, obviously, there's going to be more. Biden's expertise prior to coming in is foreign policy. This is the one thing he's worked on for years as vice president to Obama and in his time in the Senate. So it is important to note that we're probably due for some extreme foreign policy that we haven't yet seen from him, and some of the negotiations that he wants to create better deals. I do think it's going to be interesting to see his stance on China. I think we're going to probably see some aggressive action in 2022, and that could lead to some very interesting discussion as we move into the new year.
I would also keep in mind that with Afghanistan, I know that's like the thing that Biden is kind of known for now, but also keep in mind that Trump was the one who started kind of the whole process of taking the troops out of Afghanistan. Biden was kind of just like there in a bad spot and had to continue that. But other than that, we should take a look at his domestic policies too, mainly the infrastructure bill, who's being blocked by one particular senator who does not want it to be passed at all because he thinks it's too extreme.
I think you're referring to the Build Back Better bill.
Yeah.
And that is it's not being blocked. There is a change to a no from Senator Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat, And he holds a belief that if he can't explain the bill to the people that he represents, then he has to say no because the bill doesn't make sense. And I actually argue that's a very smart philosophy, because if you can't explain it, then nobody's going to understand what purpose it does. But kind of something to pay attention to is how he and President Biden had agreed upon how the bill was worded, and now there's the disagreement as to passing that bill.
Yep. I guess another big one domestically to think about is also economics in general and what's happening there. We have an episode coming up in the near future, potentially with a special guest about it. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. Always pay attention to the economy. That's really important. 2022 is going to be filled with surprises. And that's kind of why we wanted to run a few things by you guys to start paying attention to. Obviously, if you hear about an election in the news, you should be watching it. Speaking of elections, we have the midterms. That is a pretty big deal. We need to start paying attention to that. You probably are already receiving Extemp questions for it, and you will be receiving them at the start of the year. We will probably have about 5 or 6 episodes on that, because that is a very big deal as it continues to come. That's not just like, there will be like, we probably should do that like every other month and cover what's going on now that we've got we're talking through some ideas. But the midterms, US midterms, are a really big deal. It's the test of how Biden has been doing in office and how US thinks of his performance. So we do have to pay close attention to the midterms. And maybe if you like the video, if we get like 50 likes, we'll do a live stream of the midterm elections. That would be cool.
No, I need more than that. I need like 100 likes. Okay. So I think we've covered kind of the main things that you should keep an eye on and look at. And that sends us straight to kind of the questions that we have prepared for this episode. So Spencer, if you would do the honors.
All right. We'll start with the first one. I do think it's probably best that we do split this up, right? And the first question is, what are the biggest takeaways for the US from 2021? And so basically what this question is if you were to draw this question, you probably wouldn't pick it. And I would assume that this is true with most extempers, but it's kind of good to think about like what these takeaways are going to be. And obviously this is going to be like the same worded question for the world here in a minute, but for the US in particular, like what are the biggest takeaways? And I think the biggest takeaway from 2021 is that our democracy is kind of going down. It's all over the news that democracy has been fragile. And it was something that Biden mentioned in his inauguration that, well, while democracy is fragile, democracy had succeeded. But even if it's fragile and it did succeed, we know right now that the democracy in the United States is right now seeing a kind of a crumble. So the question really is, how do we restore American democracy? And I think 2021 is really a big illustration of that, and that our democracy is kind of going in shambles. It is kind of imperative to note that American democracy going into shambles is also leading to other world democracies seeing the same thing. We're seeing struggles in democracies across the globe. It's not just a US issue. Democratic views in terms of across the world are changing, and people are looking towards alternative forms of more of like a social democracy or things that can benefit other people. We've seen increase, I think, outside of democracy, it's increase in socialism and authoritarianism right now. So I think the biggest takeaway for the US is that our democracy is in trouble. And I think that was evident at the beginning of the year. I still think it's evident now, because like while the beginning of the year is what really highlighted this answer, I truthfully think that it's not I truthfully think that that really paved the way for what happened this year, and shows that our democracy or democratic viewpoints are going down.
Yeah. And kind of off of that note, which is like tangentially related, would be kind of social justice or social injustice. This is pretty common just throughout the years and not just 2021 specifically, but there have been, protests with Black Lives Matter movements. Then you have like the rise of these abortion laws and people protesting against those because they feel like their rights are being infringed on, truthfully so, rightfully so. And also with just kind of the hate crimes that have been going on with the association of Asians and Asian Americans with the COVID variants and also with COVID-19 just generally. And we see a lot of these social injustices kind of just take place all in a span of a year. And it is a lot, but it is something that we should all kind of reflect on and all really educate ourselves on, because it's something that's really important. It's something that is important to living in society and also being able to, be a good person and also like a good partner, and listening to these voices and kind of taking a look and paying attention to these social movements is especially important for our society, especially with progressing forward and especially with coming together as a community under these hard and dark times.
Absolutely. I think paying attention to social injustice is a big issue as we continue forward. These two do go hand in hand very well. I guess on that matter, if we're going to talk politics, we're going to talk society, we should also talk economics. And the truth is did our economy actually really recover in 2021? And while we can argue that all day that jobs have been the best out of all of the previous Republican presidents, our economy is still kind of in the midst of we don't know what's going on. We haven't heard anything that we have actually escaped a recession. We still think it's still noted that we're probably in one. So economically speaking, I guess a good takeaway from 2021 would be where's our economy? Are we actually moving forward? Is our economy really focused on this gig economy now? Do we have to prioritize technology over people? And if so, how do we go about that? So we start to have questions about the economic status, and that economic status does affect those who are impacted in poor communities that are seeing this problem of social injustice. It continues to harm them even within our own justice system because it causes them to continue to repeat criminal offenses possibly. There's a lot of issues with the fact that, so if we're going to talk politics and social injustice, we've got to talk about economics.
Absolutely. And again, like with unions and people unionizing, especially like healthcare workers and nurses who have experienced the worst type of just mental blockage, but also like drainage from the pandemic and everything they've had to suffer over these past years. And the fact that these hospitals aren't really doing anything else to kind of help the burden or lessen the burden that they have to take on in hospitals by like hiring more nurses or giving them more pay as they deserve. And you'll see a lot of unionization happening and unionization in other sectors of the labor market, and also with other people doing strikes so that they can get everything that they deserve from their bosses or from whoever they're working for.
And I think that really does quickly cover that answer. We hit pretty much everything there, and that leads us to the next question. You've got the floor here.
So our next question, last question, is what are the biggest takeaways for the world from 2021? And I guess I could start us off this time. What we can take away from the world is really kind of the relationships that we have between each countries and how we're going to deal with kind of this shifting and changing of the balance of powers a little bit, not only with like nuclear proliferation or non-proliferation or deproliferation, but also talks about how to solve climate change, how we can all actively work together to solve climate change and agree on what each country can do in order to fight against global warming. Other than that, we see a lot of conflicts arising between countries just generally because of like the balance of powers. We see conflicts with the Ukrainian border, we see conflicts with China and Hong Kong, and even a little bit of like Taiwan and also the South China Sea. And then we see that mainly in the United States, China and Russia are all kind of battling for world domination. And we'll see that that's going to cause a lot of tensions and problems. And in 2022, of course, that's only going to unfurl a lot more, and a lot more is going to be associated with that happening too.
I think to drive off of that point here, I think the biggest takeaway for the world in 2021 is that anarchy rules. And that's just truthful. I mean, if I was to ask what kind of government rules the world, we don't actually have a full out answer, right? We can argue that the United Nations has a form of government that's similar to a democracy in some way, shape, or form, but it's not effective in promoting its power. And as we can see during 2021 with all these conflicts that are happening, not just interstate between China and Hong Kong, but we have conflicts that are happening between multiple different nations that are beginning to starting to rise. We hear often about Russia and Ukraine. There's kind of this Cold War tension between the United States and China. There's still the threat of North Korea. There is no one form of government that rules this planet. There are multiple different types of ways that we want to govern our people. And unfortunately, that leads us into this international state of anarchy. And that's just kind of the way that it is right now, is anarchy does technically rule. And we've seen that from 2021, how all of these conflicts show that even with enforcement of power, there is no way we can control one nation and what one nation does with its people. And that nation can choose to go about what it wants to. So I think anarchy rules also sounds like a cool way of phrasing it, but I definitely think we have seen a massive rise in the thought process behind anarchy.
Yeah, honestly, anarchy rules probably sums it up pretty nicely. I don't think I have anything else just to add to the world point, because as we know, the world and its existence is also very dependent on each other and the ways that these countries interact. So the main thing to take away from the world is that these countries do interact. We are interconnected and we are all on this planet, and so we should all work together. But finding ways to agree and finding ways to work together is a very tough job, especially when anarchy rules.
And I don't have any other further points. I know you does her normal conclusion, but before she goes there, thank you guys all for the support in 2021. Yes, it was only 16 episodes. Hey, we're hoping to have 50 of them this year because we took Thanksgiving and Christmas off. So if we do the same thing, we'll have 50 episodes. Whoa. So we're hoping that we can continue to produce the same quality content that we want. We've got a good year coming for you ahead. This is the first of 50. We got 49 more coming. And I can tell you what the episode is going to be at this time next year. It'll be 2022 news recap. Weird. Maybe my prediction won't be true. We'll see. But we're really hoping for a excellent new year. I've been reading articles that said that 2021 is the worst year in American history. And not to be all doom and gloom, but the truth is it's really weird. It had a few things that just went that we just don't understand why it happened the way it did. And quite frankly, in some ways, it is kind of a truthful statement. We kind of had a rough year. We thought that 2020 was bad, and it did kind of get worse this year. not trying to be doom and gloom, but we're really trying to look optimistic into the next year in hopes that we can find some peace and stability within our own people and across the world. And while we're here to report on the doom and gloom, we want to really continue to hear your guys' support for us. And we want your feedback. We want your criticism. Even though I continuously comment that I'm going to block you if you do so, we really want to continue to hear from you guys. That support is absolutely amazing. I know that 2021 news recap is a very boring topic for many because it's like, oh, well, that's just, you have no ideas of what you want to do for the week. So why don't we just do a news recap? That might have been my idea.
That's not it. We planned this. We're smart. Okay, we're professional. But other than that, I mean, doing a recap of 2021 is also a lot of doom and gloom. So we totally understand if you don't want to listen to this episode. But please do. Please continue to support us so that you'll see us for a 2022 recap next year. Well, technically, it's only just next year. But we're recording this like 2 days before the new year. So anyway, Happy New Year. Thank you all for supporting us on this journey. It's been a wild ride this last half of the year. Please continue to listen and give us feedback whenever necessary. Vote on the polls on our stories whenever we have them for what to cover in the next episode. We have a lot more in store, a lot more planned out, and we're not done yet. So tell us how you did. Let us know if you got the one. If you didn't, tell us what place that you got. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to DM either me or Spencer, or email us if you would like. Either way, our socials are okay, not just you, but either way, our socials are linked somewhere in the video, somewhere in the podcast description, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need a friend, if you need someone to rant to about anything and everything. Feel free to hit us up, subscribe, hit the bell, like this video. Yeah, see you later.
The best way you guys can support the channel is by sharing and helping us out. So thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you all later.